Hey folks, welcome to the pre-show. Not much going on yet. 4 minutes and 25 seconds when we get started. Hey Ro, or Ellie. I do that all the time. Call Ro Ellie and Ellie Ro. How was your fun time with Grandma?
Good.
Good.
We only went swimming and got ice cream. That's the only thing.
They only went swimming and got ice cream. That's it.
Grandma might be able to buy me a phone while she's over.
Oh, really, huh?
What?
What about the park?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But we didn't stay there for a long time, so we didn't cross that off yet. We still have to do that.
Well, that's cool.
And we have to go to the teddy bear park.
Yeah. I got to find one picture I got to prep for tonight. So how's everybody doing? Hey to everybody over in the chat room. Just getting set up for tonight. And that's weird. I can't ever find anything in here. Let's see. Let's try it this way. Do a search on my computer, and it's like you have to be in the given folder in order to do a system-wide search. There it is. That's what I'm looking for. And I'm going to save that. Save it as a JPEG. No, as a PDF, so I can import that into the show tonight. Let's see. Graphics. SINAI. Save. Save. It's saved. All right. There we go. That's all I needed to do. So what do we got? 2 minutes until showtime, till we air live over on Odyssey Radio. So let's get that rolling. Boom. We're going there. And I'm going to turn that sound down so we don't have feedback. Bada boom. That's ready to go. All right. So we will launch very shortly. Hey, Delaney Pearl Jones. I don't know. Did you drop the Delaney? Because it's just as Pearl Jones these days. So June Shasta, good to see you. Leslie Holker, as always, good to see you. Master Finn, glad you're here, brother. And I say Jabel al Lawz in Saudi Arabia all the way, says Matt Finn. Moses had fled to the land of Midian, which historically is east of the Gulf of Aqaba. This is also backed up by the writings of Josephus and Philo, if you prefer. I tend to almost go along with you on that. And this is stuff I didn't know until after we had written our book. And that's why I say I'm about 98% convinced I've got the right spot. But then you see this. Now, I'm going to present some things. There are some archaeologists that took issue with that site. I tend to think that archaeologists tend to take issue with sites and archaeological data when it's not them who discovered it, or they have a pet thing. We'll talk about that a little bit. So everybody, I want you to stand by because we're going to go dark in a few seconds, and then we'll launch the show, and we'll get into it a little bit, maybe even a little bit in the captain's cabin. So stand by.
Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad, so he can take me to Disneyland.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to the program. This is Scotty Roberts, your host. And of course, this is my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on Odyssey Radio. That's ODYSY radio.com. Come on over, see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio. You can also watch this broadcast in its video simulcast, 4 different places, 3 of them on YouTube. 3 of them on Facebook, 1 of them on YouTube. That's my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. Somebody turned out my lights. So could you hit the light over there, please, Ellie? Yes, turn it on, please. Thank you. Thank you. It gets really dark in here. Really funky lighting when one of the big ones is turned off. So come on over. If you are not a subscriber to my YouTube channel, you can hit the subscribe button. Also hit the thumbs up because you like this show and it helps our numbers a bit. And if you are not a member, hit the little join button down beneath the screen and it'll show you 3 ways you can join this channel over on YouTube. So thanks for being here, everybody. Before we get really rolling, I wanted to show you this this article, or talk about this article. Guess who's back? NASA is preparing to return to the moon. Did you know that? This is an article from a few days ago. And NASA's Artemis One mission is scheduled to launch later this month, marking a major step toward NASA's first human lunar landing since the last Apollo mission in 1972. Now, Artemis One is an unmanned test flight. The flight's going to feature the first blastoff of the Space Launch System rocket, which will be the most powerful in the world. The rocket is scheduled to launch from Florida's Kennedy Space Center on August 29th, so just about 10 days from now. Something like that, whatever day this is, 16th, 13 days. So the Artemis program kicked off in 2017, and so far it's cost about $40 billion. And so tourism officials in Florida are already prepping for the massive crowds, and they're hoping to catch a first glimpse of the launch. And they're expecting crowd capacities at the Kennedy Space Center visitor complex for the upcoming Artemis launch, said Theron Protze, the visitor complex's chief operating officer. And the mission has injected a renewed sense of optimism and excitement at NASA. And at this Johnson Space Center, astronaut training's ramped up quickly, and employees at nearly Neutral Buoyancy Lab, at the nearby Neutral Buoyancy Lab, are working hard to recreate the lunar environment at the bottom of the facility's pool. And it's only been in the last few months that we started to put up the sand on the bottom of the pool just to get that large rock in 2 weeks ago, said the lab's deputy chief. It's all very new for us and very much in development. And a few years from now, they'll call that the fake lunar mission set. So Artemis One is part of NASA's long-term Moon to Mars program. And the agency hopes to send astronauts out to our planetary neighbor within 20 years. And everything that we're doing on the lunar surface, we're doing to explore for science. So by the time I'm in my 80s, they plan a Mars mission, but also to test out all the systems that will eventually need to bring down risks for a human mission to Mars. And officials view the Artemis program as a successor to the famed Apollo missions that sent the first humans to the moon. And the connection is evident in the mission's names. In Greek mythology, Artemis was the twin sister of Apollo. And so I'm going to be so excited. I won't be able to sleep too much. I'm sure of that, said Rick LeBrode, the lead flight director for Artemis One and a 37-year NASA veteran. Assuming Artemis One is a success, Americans may set foot on the moon as soon as 3 years from now in 2025. So that's kind of exciting. I'd like to see what we could do with current technology going to the moon. What did they say that the computers on board the lunar module were that are like our cell phones have bigger computers in them than the computers that first sent the first Apollo missions to the moon. So that'll be interesting. Hey, Niall, good to see you in the chat room from Ireland. Hello, all. Good to see some familiar names. Yeah, lots of good people in here tonight. Not that every other night isn't good people, but I appreciate everybody who's here. Roger Rabbit, Leslie Holker, Sarah Yusuf, Sean Stroik, Susie Q. Susie Q, one of my oldest moderators in this group. Matt Finn, my master and commander. Let's see who else is in there. I thought I saw Dave Potter, Uncle Dave. Grumpy Stack is here. And the list goes on and on and on. Scott Allen is here. Good to see you, brother. And I'm just scrolling back through to see who all is here. Just to say, hey, yo, ho, ho. Delaney Pearl Jones is here. And June Shasta is here. And everybody else. Everybody else I missed. So welcome to the program. Thanks for being here, everybody. Thanks for being here both on the YouTube channel and on the Facebook channels, and also listening audibly over at Odyssey Radio. Good to have you here tonight. Now we're talking about Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai. Now there are some people out there that would doubt that what's the importance of this? Why do we care where Mount Sinai is? And, frankly, to live a good life and, live life in the world that we live today doesn't require any knowledge of Mount Sinai at all. Maybe the only thing that is important is to a faith-based outlook on the mountain. But the big question comes up. If this is such an important thing and such a thing that happened, the Exodus being one of them, one of the Israelite people, why is there so little evidence of it? And if Mount Sinai played such a major role in the Exodus, why is there such little archaeological evidence that it existed? Why do we have 5 or 6 different locales for Mount Sinai? Because we have to guess and we have to look. And you have some people that will look for strictly the archaeological evidence. Other people will look for, well, this is kind of in the right area and it looks impressive. This must be the place. And there are others who follow just the scriptural text and say, by following the text, just what's written, it seems like it could be here. And even the Mount Sinai that I adhere to, at least for right now, and as I've said many times, I'm about 98% convinced that I'm right, that this is Mount Sinai. But I've had other archaeologists come along, other researchers that have said, well, the mountain that you think is Mount Sinai was one of the mountains that they stopped by to pick up more of the slaves on the Exodus. Once they got over into the Sinai, they stopped at this mountain where there were a bunch of Hebrew slaves that were working in the mines, and they picked them all up at this particular mountain stop. And it calls it by a different name in Scripture. And I don't even know where that is. I got to look that up again. But it's an interesting topic to me because I like going places and standing in places where things actually happened. And when John Ward and I went to Serabit el Khadim in the Sinai. We were guests of Sheikh Barakat. Many of you who are regulars to the show have heard this story a couple of times over in different types of information that we were passing on. But we got the feel when we were there. Now, can you base an archaeological historical site just based on how you feel when you're there? No, you can't. That's not good evidence. That's a gut feeling. That doesn't always mean anything. But when I was there at Serabit el Khadim, it seemed that there were many features that matched the route of the Exodus. It matched certain things about the Exodus. One of the things I will say about Serabit el Khadim is that it was called the Mountain of Hathor, and that Hathor was the patron goddess, Egyptian goddess of this mountain. She was also the patron goddess to the miners who worked there, and this was her mountain. And it seemed to me that this was the ideal place for the children of Israel to have been encamped on the desert floor below. If they built a god like the golden calf, why not this? I don't know where I just got blue paint on me. That's distressing. Could mean it's all over me somewhere else. Anyway, I just noticed that. That's why I'm commenting on it. So to me, this seemed like that was one of the reasons that I thought this mountain, Serabit el Khadim, was the place. It's got a ceremonial path that goes up the side of the mountain. You can climb that path. They put in stairways during the 20th century so you can get up certain of the more steeper portions. And there's hieroglyphs all over the walls. There's up there on the top, there are the ruins of many shrines built by successive pharaohs for about 1,600 years, starting at two little caves at the far end of this plateau. These caves, the cave of Ptah and Hathor, the gods that are dedicated up on top of that mountain. And it's all in ruins, they say, from earthquakes, and some of it looks like there was destruction that was done manually, so to speak, over the years. But it's full of these stelae, the way you might picture the Ten Commandments as Moses carried them down the mountain, only larger form to small form, piles of them. There was a community of priests that lived there that wrote out laws, wrote out incantations, all kinds of things. There's piles of spoil of many of these stelae that were carved up there. So there were many different things about this mountaintop that seemed to ring true. Flinders Petrie, archaeologist in the late 19th century, early 20th century, believed that this was, that Serabit el Khadim was the Mount Sinai in the Bible. And I've shown you, and by the way, I can show you a picture of that. Take a look at this. Well, those of you on radio don't get to see this so much. Let me show you this picture. I think I just uploaded it. Serabit el Khadim. And if I did not upload it, I will upload it now as we're talking. So this is the mountain that it's a low plateaued mountain. And it seems to fit the features that would be necessary for you to equate this to the Sinai of the Bible. But now there are other sites out there that have many more features, one that we mentioned last night. But, and it seems so good to be true that you would say, that has got to be the site, Jabel al Lawz, over in Saudi Arabia, on the other side of the Gulf of Aqaba. Now, here is, by the way, Serabit el Khadim. Let me take off my banner so you can see these pictures a little better as I'm showing them. Well, there you go. This is, I'm up on the other side. The Sheikh's compound is way down in the lower left, and his village, as you walk to the end of that sand wadi, about a quarter of a mile, and his village is there. Serabit el Khadim is over the top of, you see the two twin peaks way in the background at the center? If you just go a little bit to the left, you go over that peak right there, you're at Serabit el Khadim. And this is the wadi that seems to stretch all the way around and wrap around, encompassing these mountains. And you could just see, I remember John Ward and I, the first night we were there, there was a full moon, and there's no lights, of course. There's a fire going in the old Bedouin tent where the sheikh put us up on the desert floor. And but outside there was no light except for the full moon. And I said, you could just feel and imagine people encamped all around the base of these mountains. This mountain in particular, you could hear the cattle lowing. You could, it was all there. Now that's visceral. That's my imagination carrying me away. But this particular mountain is where I have, for the sake of writing our book, The Exodus Reality, I said, I believe this is where Mount Sinai actually is. And there were many things that we used as indicators that this was the place. But I think something that almost has a more solid, well, let's see. Niall says, well, the Ark of the Covenant is said to contain original tablets exclusively. There's no evidence except when it arrived in Ethiopia. And there's not really even evidence of that, Niall. That's the sad thing. You can't really see it. You can't really look at it. You can't really touch it. You can't examine it. According to the biblical text, sometime during one of the sacking of Jerusalem, I think it was during the Babylonian sacking of Jerusalem, that they said it was either the Babylonians or it was the Phoenicians who carried off the Ark of the Covenant and all the things that were in it. Now, that happened a couple times in the Old Testament, and they sent it back because a plague broke out and things like that. But there was another time where it said all the things were destroyed and everything was carried off, and they never saw it again. So it's lost to antiquity. We have no idea where it is, where it ended up. So could it be in Ethiopia? It just might be. But as of right now, nobody knows for sure. Some say it's back in Israel and that it's hidden in secret chambers beneath the Dome of the Rock back on the old Temple Mound. I've heard that theory as well. I heard that theory when I was in college, 40 years ago. And so there are theories abound on the Ark of the Covenant itself. But the mountain, why would the mountain be so hard to find? Even in latter Old Testament times, they seem to have lost track of where this mountain was in Israel. They just knew that it was in the Sinai, or it was, Paul said in the New Testament, he was in Arabia, which is one of the cornerstones for one of these sites. There's an ancient Puebloan, I don't know what that word is, petroglyph in Arizona. Puebloan. Yep. Okay. I was thinking Pueblo, but I thought you were talking Arabia. You're talking Arizona. That seems to depict the Ark. I have heard that. I have heard about some things in the Grand Canyon. That's something I'd like to look into. Maybe we'll do some airtime on that. Give it some airtime. Niall says the German researchers who were in Ethiopia during the 80s were alarmed that the Guardian was sick and the radiation levels were off the chart. That narrowed it down to one temple. Let's see, now that's interesting. There's all these stories we have that seem to indicate where these things are. And yet we can never quite get to the bottom of it. Never quite find out. Now, about the mountain itself, we started talking about this last night, and I've got more information here on people who said that this is why Mount Sinai is not Jabel al Lawz, and we're going to go through that a little bit. But you can look at some things about like the real Mount Sinai. And here is this is an article that I have about Jabel al Lawz. Now, we showed this picture last night. I will put it up here again for you right now so you can see Jabel al Lawz. Right here. That's a good picture. Right there. And there's Jabel al Lawz, right in the center of the screen. And the dark on top, there might be some clouds and shadows there, but the dark on top of this mountain actually is one of the features that they said led them to believe that this is Jabel al Lawz. Here, I'll show you right here. So that's showing, and they went up there and they started cracking open some stones, and it's limestone that's all been charred on top. And they said this might lead to believing that this is the place where God, his presence was there, and the char is from the fiery remains of what was left after God settled on the mountain when Moses was there. But Jabel al Lawz, let's look at this one a little bit more. There are experts who believe they found this mountain, and it's a long ways from Egypt. And the placement of Mount Sinai has always been a mystery, and it's an enigma. We've never really been able to identify it, although for like 1,300 years or more, they've believed that St. Catherine's, the traditional site of Mount Sinai, where there's a monastery built there now, has been for over 1,000 years, that was the site. And that's been the traditional site, kind of in central eastern, southeastern Sinai. And Serabit el Khadim, by the way, is more central western Sinai. And I have reasons, again, for believing why that was the place, but with a hint of doubt, a hint of being open to strong theories. So there are those who weren't academics, but popularizers who have promoted one particular mountain over the other. And the story below, down here, that I'm going to read to you some elements from, are highlights of the work of some of these people. And sadly, kind of to say, much of the theory of Jabel al Lawz seems to have been built on the work of Ron Wyatt, who was the first person to claim the Jabel al Lawz mountain range as the site of Mount Sinai. He spent something like 78 days in jail for trespassing. He was all, as we mentioned last night, barbed wired off and fenced off this whole site, this whole mountain, and the sites around the mountain that seemed to indicate that it fit some of the things in the Bible story. And so the maps in the back of your Bible might need to be updated if U.S. archaeologists' finding is accepted as the Mount Sinai of Exodus, where Moses led the Israelites. It's many kilometers or miles east of where it was previously thought to be. And the mountain where Moses received the Ten Commandments from God was not in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, but is most likely to be Jabal Makla, which lies in the Jabel al Lawz mountain range in northwestern Saudi Arabia. And so if you move over into the Arabian Peninsula, you find it incredibly compelling evidences that match the biblical account. Now, the foundation was that backed this story was set up to document the history of the Exodus story against the widespread view that it's almost entirely mythical. And one of the main reasons certain scholars claim that the Exodus is a myth is because little to no evidence for what the Bible record has been found at the traditional Mount Sinai in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. And Foundation President Ron Morrow, who is a Middle East expert, told the writer of this article, and he said, but what if these scholars have actually been looking in the wrong spot? Moreover, and move over into the Arabian Peninsula, you'll find incredibly compelling evidence that matches the biblical account. Now, when you are researching something like the location of Mount Sinai, do you just go on that feeling you get? Can you just take Scripture and say the Scripture says they did this, then they went there, then they encountered this, they encountered that, Moses did this at the mountain, this is what they built at the mountain, this is what happened there? If you start looking at all those things, is that all you really need to have evidence of historical location? I don't know. Maybe. There are several clues that add weight to the theory. And according to the biblical account, Mount Sinai was enveloped in smoke, fire, and thunder. Now, Jabel Musa has blackened peaks. That's the peak in the center of this picture that you're looking at. This is Jabel al Lawz is the region, the whole area there. Jabel Maqla, Maqla, is the mountain. And it's located close to Nuweiba Beach, where scientists have found land paths underneath the water where God could have parted the waters for Moses and the Israelites. Now, remember, my theory takes them through the Bitter Lakes at the north of here. This is a good time to take a look at the map again. Let me bring this map in again that we talked about last night, and it'll give you some ideas here. Let's see. Add to stream. Right here. Okay. If you look to the north of this map, this is the map I created for our book, The Exodus Reality. If you look way up in the north in the Nile Delta area, you'll see Cairo. And just to the south of Cairo by about 20, 25, 30 miles at the most, you've got Mennefer, which is ancient Memphis, current day Memphis. And this is where the northern capital of Egypt was in Mennefer. And then you go up the Nile through what is now Cairo. You see the land of Goshen. This is in the southeast of the Nile Delta. And then you see the Wadi Tumilat. That was a trade route. And I believe, and you see Avarus just north of Goshen. It's in the further northern eastern section of Goshen. Avarus was the city that was built by the Canaanite and Hebrew and Israelite slaves, probably prior to being slaves. Because remember, for about 700-800 years, Canaanites and what the Egyptians referred to as the Asians or the Asiatics coming from the Middle East came and settled into that area. And they settled and they built Avarus. And Avarus was the city on top of which Ramses II built Pithom and Ramses, or Pi-Ramses, his treasure cities, which it mentions in the book of Exodus. The Hebrews built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses, which were built by Ramses II. That's why his name has always been attached to the Exodus. However, he would have lived about 150 years too late, Ramses II, for the Exodus, based on many other historical and archaeological evidences. And so what the Hebrews built was the city of Avarus, and it was usurped by 150 years after they left. It was rebuilt by Ramses II as his treasure cities. So the Nile says the current location of the tablets and its reliquary is contained deep within Vatican City. Well, I could believe that. Actually could. I have no doubt about that. You wish you could find the evidence to make that an empirical, I know this for sure statement. Matt Finn says there's a distinctive line of charred rock and naturally occurring geology. Yes, there is. Well, here, what I have done to this map, if you look way up here by Avarus, I have the Israelites moving down into the Wadi Tumilat and going across the northern tip of the Red Sea, which is the Sea of Reeds. And I've talked about the geological wind bursts that can happen there, that you can dry off this very shallow lake and then can suddenly close in like a tsunami. And I had them going down the it'd be the western shore of the Sinai, the eastern shore of the Red Sea, down to about the midpoint, and they move over to Serabit el Khadim. Now, the traditional site, if you do a little diagonal line to the southeast of the Sinai, is where St. Catherine's is, which I do not have on this map. But the yellow line I've drawn is showing that they could have passed around the tip of the Bitter Lakes and come all the way down that eastern shore of the Red Sea, crossed over the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula, and that there is a submerged land bridge there that has been dried at times. The wind could blow. If it's a miracle of God, could God dry that water off of there? Sure. That's a faith element that you have to add into the story, but it's only about 3 or 4 feet deep. And it showed these archaeologists, these guys who were researching this site a few years ago, they're out there in their wetsuits and they're walking along out in the middle of this, what looks like the sea here, but they're walking along this very narrow strip of the sea, the Gulf of Aqaba, on the land bridge. And he said, now it would had to have been dried off because you couldn't transport, anywhere from 200,000 to 2 million people. The numbers all vary depending on interpretation of the text. You'd have to be able to transport animals and people across that land bridge. Now, what's also interesting, this is also known as the Yam Suf. If you've heard that word before, which is a biblical word for where they crossed, the Yam Suf. And the Yam Suf literally means, in Arabic, it means land's end. And that would be down at the southern tip of the Sinai. It's called the Yam Suf. Now, they cross over at this point. If you look on this map, they just do a little jog up to the northwest or the northeast of that site. They run into what they found to be the bitter springs, if it's the same spot that the Israelites encountered and the water wasn't good to drink. And they traveled on a few more miles and they ran into the oasis of Elim. And at that oasis, there was supposed to be 12 springs, palm trees all over it. This is what these guys found. And they took pictures of all of this. 12 springs sprouting up. Is that a coincidence? Then they go on and they find the mountain of Jabel al Lawz or Jabal Malka, and in Jabel al Lawz. So here, hold on. Boom. All right. So that's this mountain where they've arrived at. Now let's get back into this and taking a look at this. Now, there's an old saying that rings true for these fields of research, and that's miss by an inch is a miss by a mile. So when you're looking at geography and history, and you're looking at all of these archaeological elements that have to be just so. So here's the question: are the other sites that do not have much when it comes to archaeological evidence of them actually being the site of Mount Sinai? What is it that you're looking at? Are you missing something? Are you missing the mile by missing the inch? And so, on the way through from the beach to the putative Mount Sinai site is a large split rock, and it has signs of water erosion, despite being in the middle of the desert. And Maros said, we believe the distinct landmark could be the rock that God commanded Moses to strike, from which water then gushed forth, miraculously providing water for the Israelite population. Now that picture, let me pull that up again. If you weren't here last night, or if you were, you'll get to see this again. Let's see. Split rock is right here. Boom. Now, there's the split rock at Jabel al Lawz. This is one of the features that they looked at. And they said, yeah, Matt Finn, here you go. Matt Finn says, how many coincidences before mathematically impossible? There you go. I don't believe in coincidences, by the way. But a random element, and I only bring up coincidence to say one random element that seems like it's the right place, you could say, is that a coincidence? Until you get 14 of them. And then you go, is that still a coincidence? Now, this is the split rock. And if I had a closer picture, I could show you this whole area. You can see there is water erosion. It said that Moses hit the rock with the staff, and God gushed forth this huge spring, which gushed down the side of this hill and filled this little basin at the bottom and made a small lake of fresh water. And that they did this twice. Here's Niall said there are thousands who gave their lives to bury the ark in Rome. It's radioactive and lethal. Those who handle it die. But on its way, it had to go on a long journey. Now, see, my belief about the ark and the lethal nature of the ark, was it radioactive, or was it the power of God that made it lethal? God said, you can't touch this ark. Only the high priest could. And one time a year. And there was the one guy who stopped the ark from tipping off the ox cart, and he was struck dead by it for touching it. Now, my understanding was that that was solely the power of God residing in the ark. And there was a distinct point where it said in the divided kingdom era after the time of David and Solomon and Rehoboam and Jeroboam and all those kings, that it says, "And God's presence left the ark." Would it have still had that lethal capacity? I don't know. Strange thing is, Hollywood always showed us reality is fantasy. Raiders of the Lost Ark. Exactly. Niall. Exactly. So, well, anyway, this is one of the sites. This is the split rock where it is said that Moses struck the rock. Now, Matthew Sainsbury brought up last night, well, Moses only spoke to the rock against God's command. Well, that was the second time. There was 2 times he was supposed to have water come from the rock. And if you remember, this is where I don't get God all the time, the way he did things in the Old Testament. But Moses, who led all these people out, he did all these things. He did everything God told him to do. He struck the rock the first time with the rod. And the second time says God said, "Speak to the rock. Don't strike it." And Moses, because he was pissed off at the people, he said, "How many times must we do this for you?" And he strikes the rock again with the rod instead of speaking to it. Water gushes forth still. But then God tells Moses, "Now, because you've disobeyed me and did this the wrong way, you don't get to go into the land of promise. You'll die before you get there." Number 1, he didn't do as God commanded. Number 2, he equated himself with God. Now, Moses, I think, did that quite a bit. Remember when it said, this was my theory on this verse, when they're after the Exodus and they're in the wilderness, it said Moses would pitch his tent outside the camp, away from the people. And he was like distinctive. He distinguished himself from the people. And it says, and there in that tent, God's Shekinah glory would settle on the tent. And there Moses spoke to God, as it's written in Exodus, face to face, as a man talks to his friend. But then 9 verses later in the same chapter, Moses says, no man can see God's face and live. Now, what was he saying there? Was that a contradiction? I don't think so. I think Moses was thinking in the Egyptian way of thinking. Remember, the Pharaoh, the leader, was a god. The pharaohs were brothers and sisters to the gods. And I think Moses saw himself this way. That was his understanding of God. I am a brother to the God. And therefore, I can talk to God face to face, but you can't, because I'm a little more than a man. Dave Potter says, I believe Moses felt entitled to speak to God the way he did. Yeah, he did. He felt it. He felt entitled. And so that's why God disallowed him from going into the promised land. All he could do was climb the slopes of Mount Nebo, where it says he died alone and God buried him, but he was able to view the promised land from the peak of Mount Nebo. Matter of fact, you can go to Mount Nebo outside of Jordan today. You can climb that mountain, and there's a building up there, a church, worship places, a visitor's center, and you can go out in the balcony and you can see the view Moses would have seen from the top of Mount Nebo into the promised land. So Moses got a big head, says Joe Sapiens. That's pretty much it, Joe. And, in a way you want to say he deserved one. In a way, this is what he was taught for the first 40 years of his life, living as a prince in Egypt. Remember, I believe he was that guy back there over my shoulder, Senenmut. Senenmut, if that is truly Moses, was given his name, Senenmut, by Hatshepsut, the Pharaoh Queen of Egypt. And Senenmut means mother's brother. I, your mother, am elevating you to the status of brother to the gods with me. That was the first half of his life up until the Exodus. And then he went and dwelt in Midian for a while. Now it says Midian was east of the Sinai, which would place it into, they believe that Midian was in Saudi Arabia, what is now Saudi Arabia. The Apostle Paul said that Mount Sinai was in Arabia. So now if this is the case, if indeed they crossed that land bridge at the south of the Sinai. They could have done that. They could have crossed at the Sea of Reeds up in the north and walked across and come down through Saudi Arabia. Who knows the route they took? This is another thing that lacks evidence. If you've got, the Bible says that there were 200,000 men and their wives and their families and their flocks. Now, an average family in those days, even slave families, they had large families. They had a lot of kids. So you figure if 200,000 men each had a wife, or most of them, say right there you've got maybe 200,000 men with 200,000 wives. Then you've got, let's say, an average of 4 kids apiece. That would be 800,000 more on top of that 400,000. You'd have 1.2 million people, plus their flocks, plus their belongings, plus the Egyptians that came along with them, and so on. Now, that's how they calculate, and they say there could have been upwards of 2 million people during the Exodus. Well, if you had anywhere from 200,000, some say it's a misinterpretation of the numbers system. Let's just give them that and say if it's anywhere from 200,000 to 2 million people that are traversing this area and wandering as nomads in this area for 40 years, you're going to have traces of this. There's going to be archaeological evidence. There it is, Matt Finn, Galatians 4:25, Mount Sinai in Arabia. Now, the Sinai was considered to be part of Egypt. It still is today. The Sinai is Egypt. But now they're saying, some historians say, well, no, that wasn't so back 3,000 years ago. Egypt had garrisons there and forts there on the eastern side and in the north, but they didn't own the territory of Sinai. I tend to believe that's a stretch. I think the Egyptians owned the Sinai. That was part of Egypt. So, crossing the Red Sea, according to the biblical story. Remember, what is the Red Sea? The Red Sea, here, look at this. Let's call this map up again. The Red Sea is down here, down to the lower left of that map. You can't really see it here, the whole thing. The big expanse that goes all the way down. That is the Red Sea. And there are 2 fingers of the Red Sea that come up and surround the Sinai, the Red Sea, and then the Gulf of Aqaba, an extension of the Red Sea. So the Red Sea, they crossed the Red Sea. What if they crossed the Red Sea right at the mouth of the Gulf of Aqaba? That would still be considered, I think, the Red Sea by historical contexts. Matt Finn says they controlled the mines in the Sinai. They controlled the whole territory. That's it. Even what I have called Mount Sinai in my book, you look here on the map, Serabit el Khadim, to the west center of the Sinai. That is where there's that whole region is filled with the copper and turquoise mines that belong to the Egyptians. So during this time period, the Sinai was Egypt. It was part of Egypt. And to get to Arabia, you had to cross over the Gulf of Aqaba or go up a little north and take the land route over, the trade routes. So as we go on with this, we believe the distinct landmark could be the rock that God commanded Moses to strike, from which the water then gushed forth. That was one of the huge landmarks. 2 other places of nearby evidence are also striking at Jabel al Lawz. And here, I'm going to put the picture of Jabel al Lawz back up there so you can, there's the mountain itself. This is the mountain, the range, the area. So there are other features that 2 other pieces of very notable evidence, very striking, a site that appears to be an altar near the base of the mountain, such as Moses built at the time, at the foot of Mount Sinai, and God ordered them to build it from uncut stones. And then there's a graveyard, which Morrow suggests could be where the worshippers of the golden calf were buried, possibly. Wasn't it the earth opened up and they were sucked into the earth or something, according to the biblical text? They were buried after being struck down by Moses for idolatry. Man, we're already 50 minutes after the top of the hour. So close to the mountain, we have this site covered with depictions of people worshiping bulls and cows, Morrow told The Sun, adding that the rock carvings are isolated in this area rather than carved all over the mountain. It's just at the here's the let me throw this up again from yesterday. I showed you this picture. Here is the I'm looking for the altar. Here we go. This is the altar at the base of the mountain. Now, also, it wouldn't be a far stretch to say that the Israelites, who were working as slaves for at least 200 to 300 years in the land of Egypt, they were building monuments, didn't have the ability to build a rough-hewn monument like this. And if you look closely, the graffiti you see on here is not modern-day graffiti. This is all old graffito that is here of the calves, the Apis bull, people worshiping them. And adjacent, this is this big V-shaped that they found the stonework in the ground, the foundations of what would have been a cattle holding pens right next to this altar. And so you start looking at that and you say, wow, is this the place? Then there's some other things, by the way. We'll get to those in the last 2 minutes here, I hope. I'm just going to give you a list real quick. And this is from the article that doubts that this is the actual site. Some of the things that are found there's a bullet list here. There are at least 8 pieces of archaeological or geographical evidence that the proponents of the Jabel al Lawz site for Mount Sinai used to support their idea. One is a land bridge that goes across the Strait of Tiran from the southern tip of Sinai to Saudi Arabia. Or in the other view, a land bridge that crosses the Gulf of Aqaba, islet from Nuweiba. And so the second one is a set of bitter wells that they identify as Mara that was on the way to the mountain after they crossed the sea. The next was 12 springs of Al-Bad that they identify as Elim. And then there's the caves of Moses and Jethro at Al-Bad. Then there's an altar for the golden calf with petroglyphs of bovines all over it. Then there's the altar of Moses and the 12 pillars. You see the remnants of 12 round pillars that were stacked pieces that are scattered around here that make up the 12 pillars that Moses would have used to build, to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. He erected these pillars. Then you have the blackened rock at the top of the mountain. And then you have the split rock of Horeb, as it's called. Now, I've got an article in front of me here where they discount a lot of these things. They say the tombs of Moses are really the tombs of the Nabateans. And they go through and they give some identification. The Red Sea crossing and all of this. The Mediterranean sites of the Red Sea crossing. There's Mediterranean Sea sites. There's Northern Sea sites. There's the central site. There's the southern site. And there's the southeastern view. And all of these were different possible crossings. The only problem we have is that strict archaeological evidence. But what we do have is like what John Ward and I felt atop Serabit el Khadim. We felt that this was the place because it had some things that matched it. Then about a year after publishing that book, our book, The Exodus Reality, I ran across this whole site. And here it is, by the way. You can read all about it in this book. Get my book for $29.95 and you'll read all about it. So The Exodus Reality with John Ward. I believe that it was Serabit el Khadim. But I'm not as convinced that that is the site, but rather a site that they stopped along the way and where they picked up the miners, the slaves who were the miners in that Egyptian mining region right around Serabit el Khadim. It's very possible that Mount Sinai was Jabel al Lawz because there's too much archaeological evidence. Despite the naysaying back and forth, there are archaeologists who claim that the Temple Mount isn't really the Temple Mount beneath the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. And they have their archaeological evidences to say why. Well, you're always going to have controversy. I believe it's obvious that was the Temple Mount. So, Matt Finn, good stuff. We gotta. I hate to do this. We gotta say goodbye to our radio audience. Everybody, stick around for the captain's cabin because I want to continue this discussion a little bit. So for now, to the radio audience, I just want to say to you, live long and prosper.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid Radio Program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad, so he can take me to Disneyland.
So what do you all think of that? What do you all think of that? And by the way, welcome to the captain's cabin. I will be here for a short time tonight, and just feast your eyes. So by the way, Niall is asking for the link. Here is the link to call into the captain's cabin. Boom, just pasted it into the chat room. There's a little bit of a delay, so you'll see it there in a few seconds. And that's how to get here. Grumpy Stack. Think of what? You're talking? Sound like my wife. What? Did you say something? No, she loves me more than that. By the way, Rainey will be back with my son Flynn from Alaska the day after tomorrow. So there will be no show on Thursday evening because that's the time she lands, is right in the middle of this show. So I'll be driving to the airport in the cities to pick her up. So we'll have a archived show playing, probably not in here, but you'll be able to see it or listen to it anyway over at Odyssey Radio. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. Appreciate having everybody here. This is fascinating stuff to me. I got to tell you, Matt Finn, I'm going to tell you this especially. I'm not as unconvinced about this site as it may sound. I just want to treat it right because I want to know more about it. I want to study it a little more in depth and find out what they're saying about the archaeology, what they're saying about the historicity of the place. I have this big article I was going to dig into tonight. Maybe we'll hit it tomorrow night, just to get into it and hit the pros and cons of it. But here's Niall. Hey, Niall, welcome. But I want to see
Scotty.
what else going on with this site. I want to see if this is an actual, what their arguments are against the archaeology and the historicity of Jabel al Lawz. How you doing, brother?
There's no argument against it at all. But
No.
it's kind of
The
curious.
only argument against it is they're trying to discount it, and I don't know why they would discount it. It's like the things like the people who discovered the mountain site and all the correlations to the biblical text. One of the things that sticks in my mind is that they saw the caves of Moses. They've been called that. They asked the Bedouin. Bedouin, they don't give a rat's ass. They don't care. Have a one way or the other. They said, "Oh, those are the caves of Musa," and the caves of Moses. They've been that way for thousands of years. They've been called that. But now they're saying, well, those aren't really the graves of the children of Israel or anything. That's the Nabatean caves, the Nabatean. But there's been no archaeological work done there because the government of Saudi will not allow it to take place. It's fenced off.
And I think it's very interesting that you brought this up tonight because I've been read a lot about this over the last 20 years. And the route of, or the route, as the American says, do you say route or route? I think you say route.
Either or.
Yeah, either or, yeah. It's very similar to the route of the Turin Shroud. It tends to not really know where it's going until eventually it ends up in Europe,
Yep.
Which means it somewhere ends up between the Red Sea and coming up through the Red Sea. Similar, I brought a map up just for my own benefit, because I've read so much about this. It kind of goes down from Saudi to Ethiopia, to Djibouti, over to Yemen, up the Red Sea, over to Israel, of course. Kind of they're trying to escape somewhere, but they can't because they're into Somalia at that stage, and they're into the pretty much southern Africa.
Yes.
So then they change the route up through the Red Sea and up through Jordan and Damascus and Lebanon and Constantinople, and on through Europe. So this is something that I've been reading about for the last 20 years, is the roots of these ancient relics.
Yes.
And the history of them and their travails. Because once you actually read enough silly books and garbage books and serious historian books and all, you kind of say there's a pattern here. There's kind of a pattern that's beginning to evolve, and in Christianity, one would of course be the Shroud, and the other one would be the Ark of the Covenant, and the other would be of the tablets, the Ten Commandments of Mount Sinai, and it strikes me that these patterns of belief systems tend to travel along the same roads or the same routes as most Christian beliefs.
Yes.
They tend to kind of disappear and then reemerge via Israel up into Europe, up into Rome, So that's the only thing I can add to this. And also, it is true. I was saying earlier on that there was a German documentary team in the 80s who sussed this all out, and they kind of said, yeah, the Ark, where's the, this all started with the Knights Templar, of course. That's where
Yes.
they began their journey. And, they came across this really strange temple in Ethiopia where you couldn't film. And all the guys were like, freaking out. They were all like monks. There wasn't any violence, but they had to film at night. And eventually they got talking to one of the caretakers of this little temple, shrouded in trees and then by a wire fence that you couldn't climb over. And he came over to the fence one day, dressed in robes, and he was like, he was blind. He says, he says, are you the caretaker of the Ark? And he says, yes, through a translator, one of the monks who was staying on a further encampment. He says, yes, I'm the third generation of the keeper of the Ark. When I die, it will pass to my son. And I says, when did you see your son? I haven't seen my son in I can't remember. And he was blind, and he was obviously, well, in context, he was suffering from some kind of radioactive illness,
Yeah.
So the path of this, what I would call the device, I've always called it the device.
The device.
Yeah, it's kind of like the ultimate nuclear bomb for lack of belief. It's kind of like the if you again, you might think I'm reading straight from the annals of Hollywood here, Raiders of the Lost Ark, but Hollywood knows about this for years. They've written all about this for years. It's not Nazis, of course, but the actual fundamental essence.
Well, it is true that Hitler was looking for all this junk.
Yeah.
During during his time, and sent all kinds of expeditions out.
I guess the passage is what I've really focused in on. The passage of all of these, including the Shroud, etc., they all take the same route up to the Red Sea. It's almost like, they don't know where quite to go. They need to put this stuff in storage and then put it up, and it eventually ends up in Europe and eventually ends up in Vatican City. Now, you might say, well, there's no proof of that. There's no proof of that, except for the amount of books I've read on it.
Right.
And you kind of form an opinion. So what's your opinion of what I said?
My opinion is that I have heard enough of this kind of thing to not immediately dismiss it for any reason, because there's more strangeness that we've encountered regarding the Vatican, regarding hidden relics. I happen to be a pretty strong believer in the Shroud of Turin, and in the I was going to say Mandalorian, not Mandalorian.
Me too. Absolutely, I believe it.
What was the cloth? Not the. I wanted to say Mandalorian. The cloth with the blood on it. It was like a hand cloth. It's the word for the Roman
mantle,
word for the hand cloth. I can't think of it off the top of my head. It's something like Mandalorian. But there is that cloth that has blood stains on it that match up to the blood stains on the Shroud of Turin. And they say this is the cloth. It says even in the scripture, it says that they wrapped a cloth around his face. The Mandalorian, the mandolin, the mandal something. I can't think of what it's called. The shroud, not the shroud, Michelle. The shroud was what they put over the top of that they had wrapped his face. But then they removed that and then shrouded him, and they folded the cloth that was over his face and placed it alongside him in the tomb. And that was there, that when they came and found the shroud empty, there was the folded cloth was there as well, as mentioned in scripture. But I can't think of what the name is. You got to look it up. The cloth that covered Jesus' face. Hang on. I got to get this right. It's called the face cloth, sudarium. I don't know how I got Mandalorian out of that. The sudarium. Go look up some pictures of the sudarium. Sudarium. It's the sudarium of Oviedo.
Yeah, let's talk about the shroud just for a moment. Right.
Yeah.
The shroud has been studied. Okay, it's been studied in three different decades: 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And it's not a painted piece. It's not by Leonardo da Vinci. It's not a medieval fraud. They could age.
I have a skeptical friend of mine, very smart guy, that still insists, well, the shroud is just painted. I said, that shows me your skepticism isn't very well founded because you haven't researched it. You can't just be skeptical of something and dismiss it. You're dismissive. I said, you're not skeptical.
Yeah,
because you studied, you'll find it was not painted.
Yeah, the linen, was created out of plants, dead plants, effectively, and it was very easy to, with current technology, to find out the age of the plants that died, that were formed from the weave that made the shroud.
Yep.
Okay, so it was very easy to say that what it was not on the surface; it was of the weave, right? Of the weave. So that's an incredible transformation.
Well, they said
in thought.
Those who were studying it said that paint. Now, I might be off on my numbers on this. Paint needs a minimum of 14 microns to adhere to fiber.
Yes.
14 microns deep. And they said the image on the shroud is less than 7 microns deep.
Yes.
So it's an image that is on the shroud. The fibers have been changed, but it's not a pigment that's adhering to the shroud.
And it's not a pigment. And the strange thing about the shroud is that by today's standards, it would be easy enough to replicate if people took the time, because it's actually if you put a linen shroud of somebody who was being tortured, who had been crucified, or who had been gone through extreme pain, that the sweat glands produce hormones and acids and toxins that will adhere themselves to any fabric that's put above them. Are you with me?
I am.
So back, these days, if anyone took anything off, somebody who's, tortured in a room and wrapped in a cloth, you would find some very interesting result from their sweat and their adrenaline and the
I wonder.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of those explanations, and I've seen the guy that founded Shroud.com 35 plus years ago, or 35 years ago, as soon as the internet was really in vogue. He was the photographer that came with the JPL laboratories in '78 to examine the shroud. And he thought, he's a Jewish guy. And he said, I thought, hey, free trip to Italy, I'll do it. And he says, in the first 5 minutes I was there, I could tell you it was not painted. It was not manufactured. And he went on to, now I'm still a Jew. He says, but I don't know what to make of this. He says, my conclusion is, he says, the image that is on here is probably something miraculous. After all the studying, they've gone through everything you just talked about, all the different studies of this. He said, I find very little way that you can qualify this image sticking to this shroud, other than something that he says, I feel that God had something to do with it, was the way he put it.
Yeah,
now,
I mean,
Gary Yusuf asks, what's the value of worshiping object? None. I don't think there's a value in worshiping. I don't worship the shroud. I wouldn't.
No, it's not a matter of worshiping. It's
Yeah.
it's like it's a bit like Mount Sinai. I'm not going too far off the topic here. I think that with the shroud, it's a good example of something authentic that we deny or try to throughout the Middle Ages, I've read all these books and says, well, yeah, and it ended up in Constantinople, and it got, plundered and burnt, and all this DNA was all over it, and so we can't really tell what's going on with the shroud anymore. And there are various line cuts and wood cuts from the Middle Ages showing the various popes holding the shroud up by its edges, and they said, "Oh, it's contaminated," But that isn't true. That isn't true. I mean, it is. What is true is that you can't get a hold of it. You can't get in there. And I believe the same thing happened with the Ark, which contains the tablets. I think this was meant and designed to make a journey which nobody at the beginning really understood where it would take them. It took them south, but then it took them east, and then it took them eventually north and up to Europe.
Yep.
And that took many couple of thousand years to actually, well, not quite 2,000 years, about 1,500 years to do that, to make that journey. And eventually it ended up in the Vatican, and in Vatican City. My own personal belief about the tablets of Mount Sinai, it was they were completely real, but they were not like, this is the way you're meant to live your life. Do this and everything will be okay. And, tablet number 2, do this and you'll be okay. Tablet number 3. I think these were lethal objects of the power and the essence of God.
I think you may have had actual tablets that enlisted the 10. These are the basic 10. Here you go. But then you look at Levitical law. Levitical law filled 3 more books in the Bible. So this was just the basis of the law. And then what did Moses do? Moses broke them when the people were worshiping the golden calf. Then he went up to get a new set. It's interesting to you start digging into this stuff and you say, why do we discount it? It's because it's a story of faith. That's why the world generally discounts these things. And you've got your believers, or those of you who want to believe, of us who want to believe, and it's okay. Here's an oversimplified, stupid example. It'd be like this. If I obtained the actual shirt that William Shatner wore as Captain Kirk in the 1960s series, I would go, I've got the shirt that the dude wore in this iconic series. I wouldn't worship it. I wouldn't sleep in it. I wouldn't rub it on my face or anything like that. But I might put it on a mannequin and put it inside a glass cabinet, along with my other Star Trek junk, and say, I'm not worshiping that, but that represents something that meant a lot to me with a science fiction show I grew up with. Iconic shirt, and I've got the actual shirt the man wore. So that's the way in it. That's a very small microcosm, a small way of... No,
but add a couple of 100 years onto that.
Yeah.
And all becomes iconic.
When we were when I was in Egypt, the times I was there, when I was at places, I've got a picture I'm going to show. I'm going to share my screen in a minute here. And everybody take a look at these pictures of Serabit el Khadim, which was my original thoughts of this is where Mount Sinai was. There was a place on the backside of that mountain. It's not open to tourists or anything. We took this crickety road down climbing cliffs to get down the backside of the mountain when we went back down. But I stopped at a cliff that overlooked the whole region, and I put a stack of stones there, which is probably still there. A stack of stones for me, my wife, and my 6 children. And I stacked those stones up there. And unless there was an earthquake, those stones are still sitting there on a ledge that you wouldn't even see unless you knew what you were looking for. But while we're in this, and I'm talking about, I'm going to share my screen with you, with the whole world here watching. Because
by the way, Scotty, hope I'm not keeping you from stopping the show or anything like that. You let me know whenever you want to.
You're good. Just stick around.
Cool.
And
maybe
I'm going to
Dave
share
Potter.
this.
I'd be
This
interested to
is
know what
my
Dave.
view of the mountain that I believe was the mountain of God. All right. We'll start here. I've just got about 12 or 15 pictures up here. This is John Ward and I when we met Sheikh Barakat out in the Sinai for the first time, and he's taken us to his place. He's kind of the guardian of Serabit el Khadim. That's his compound down there in the middle, and I think you can see my mouse circling it. Not hard to tell. That's his little public gathering spot. And way back here, way in the upper left, back behind that mountain is Serabit el Khadim. So we had to drive down the road here and go in, and we start climbing up on the other side there. And I was up on the far side of the encampment here, down above the wadi. That's Sheikh Barakat. He cooked dinner with us in an old 120-year-old Bedouin tent where he had us staying, and he cooked us dinner by his own hand. Let me fit that on the screen a little better. There he is. And that's dates. That's not part of it. It's my daughters and John Ward's daughters. I'll just flash that up there for fun. There's my two daughters on the left and in the middle, Abby and Bryn, and John Ward's daughter, Bryony. They all came with us on this trip.
That's so nice. Yeah, I haven't seen your older daughters before. Yeah,
That's them. That's Abby and Bryn, the twins.
Yeah.
So then we've
My
got
God, they're so grown up compared to
They
your own
are.
kids. Yeah.
Now this was in 2014, so that
So
was 8
they must
years
be close
ago.
to 30 at this stage, are they?
Yeah, they're 30 now.
Or 30 now.
30 years
Yeah,
old
wow.
now. They were 22 in this picture.
Wow.
So Hathor, this is up on top of Serabit el Khadim. You'll see all these stelae, like you see here, that are broken off. Some are thick and standing, like this one in the background. You can see this whole site is littered with these. This is Hathor carved into that one. This is just a fun picture. John and I arguing over some hieroglyphic on the way up the mountainside.
Yeah. What does that mean? Yeah. Well, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I see
yeah.
this. I see that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
we were just having fun.
Cool.
We had
Yeah.
13, 14 people with us. So this is at the top. Once you get to the top of the mountain, you can see out all of this area in the background, all of this area over to the left. There's a big chasm in between here. This is on the opposite hill. This is all the mines.
I think I can see the edge of the chasm on the
Yeah,
left
right
hand
down in
side
here.
of the photograph. Yeah.
Right in here. These are
Yeah.
all mines.
Yeah.
This is where all the Israelites and other slaves and Egyptians were mining.
Yeah.
Now, if you flip this around at this point and look the other direction, this is the caves here of Ptah and Hathor, and there's a compound there that's thousands of years old. There is, and you'll see as we get closer to it, but there's all these ruins and pottery, and there's these piles of shards of stelae all over the place. Here we are with Sheikh Barakat down in his compound. And that's not snooze in my pocket. That is a camera lens, a lens cap, I should say. Now, I brought this one up because I wanted to show, once again, can you see my mouse on this?
Yes, I can.
Okay. This is Mennefer was here. Cairo is up here. The land of Goshen is right here.
Yeah, and as you go down, you get to
And
Ethiopia
here's the
eventually.
Wadi
That's the
Tumalat.
Red Sea. Yeah.
There's the Wadi Tumalat right there.
Yeah.
And it connects with the Sea of Reeds. And then, of course, the northern, here's the Red Sea. And the Red Sea extends up here. The Suez Canal goes up here now.
Yes.
And this is the Gulf of Aqaba. And this mountain, al Lawz, would be right down in here. And by the way, Jabel al Lawz is an ancient name in Arabic. It means the mountain of the law. What does that tell you?
Yeah, it says a lot, you know.
It says a lot.
You have to pay attention to all these things. Yeah. Go ahead.
This is this was on our way up the mountain. This is the pathway, and they built little walls here so tourists don't fall down. And back 50, 60 years ago, they put some of these walls in. But this is going up the mountainside here. And all of this in the background is all mines. And then you go to...
When you say mines, Scotty,
yes,
do you mean mines for what? For what?
ancient mines, copper and turquoise.
Okay.
And some of those mines have ancient Paleo-Hebrew inscribed on the walls. So it's very interesting. They found it at this site. So out here in the desert. Now this again is the top of Serabit el Khadim.
Wow. That monolith rings a few bells.
And
if you've ever seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, that
yes,
looks very similar.
This is one of the chambers. There were chambers all through
look
here
at that.
for 1,600 years worth of pharaohs.
Yeah.
Now this would have been seen from the desert floor down below. This was actually you see the round areas here. They had pillars in here. This was like a shrine that was built up here that you could see from the desert floor. So passersby on the trade route could see, oh, this is Hathor's mountain. This is Serabit el Khadim. This is just a little more of the same thing. More of those ruins of those chambers of each successive pharaoh.
Just full of monoliths. You know, it's very striking. Yeah.
This was on the way up. The first time I was there. So you see, they've even way down here. There's a sign down here on the path. It says, keep going this way. You know, this is what the path looks like going up this mountain. That's just me. I want to find the rest of these pictures. Okay, here's just another map of the area. Once again, Avarus is up in here. And this is Goshen and the Wadi Tumalat, the Bitter Lakes, the Sea of Reeds. Serabit el Khadim is here. St. Catherine's, the traditional site, is here. And Jabel al Lawz would be like right over in here.
Right over in there, yeah.
So...
very special part of the world.
Certainly is.
I wish I had...
this is...
I presume it took a lot of permission for you to go there, you know.
We just had to get an Egyptian visa that allowed us to go over there. And we got permission from Sheikh Barakat.
Well, that's what I mean, Sheikh Barakat, you know.
Yeah.
Because he has the compound.
He picked us up in his little, there's actually a picture of it, I think, here at the end. He picked us up. We'll get to it. Let's see.
No, go
this
ahead.
Is more of Serabit el Khadim up over the mountaintop here. Serabit 2, that's just another shot of the same from the opposite mountain. Serabit 3, there's John and I up on the cliffs, and Serabit el Khadim is right behind here.
It looks almost overwhelming.
It is. You get that feel when you're
Scotty,
there.
you must have been like, what the hell? You know, because you must have felt like you were in this kind of on the surface of Mars in a way.
Yeah.
You know,
it kind of felt that way. And when you're climbing up, you just kind of put it out of your mind. I'm climbing this mountain. And you just climb up. Let's see. Then we have here's some more. Now this is at the top. You see, this is the entryway. That big stele here, and behind.
I see that. Yeah.
Behind Little Mo here. That's the entryway, and there's all these chambers that go all the way back to the caves back here. And these were the Bedouins who took their camels, were all resting down off camera here. But the surprise we had for the people who came on the trip, these were all the people who came on the trip with us. And, well, most of them anyway. And on Camelback, there's a road on the back side of the mountain, not quite as rough as the ancestral pass or the ancient pathway. They took the camels up. They hauled up these chairs and the table, and John had made a china set with all the different plates and the cups and the glasses and the service and all of that with our logo. You see in the red here.
That's what I see
reality.
there in the center. Yeah.
Yeah, the Exodus Reality logo.
Do you mean he just made that?
He had it all printed up. He bought the china and had it all imprinted. And the Bedouins brought all of this up and cooked all the food. for us. They're
You're
over by the
kidding.
fire there. And
I
so
mean,
we
that China
got to the
set
top of this mountain and
looks
we had lunch.
enormous. It looks like very ornate and lots of
It
little.
was very out of place.
Yeah.
And John took great pride in doing that. White linen napkins and white china and food cooked by the Bedouins up on top of this mountain where 6 people a year visit. You know, I looked at the Sheikh's book, his guest book, the first time I was there, and over about a 6-year period, he'd only had about 12 people visit. So
Just stay on the photograph for a second, if
Yeah.
you don't mind, Scotty. The artist in me, the dark artist, is fascinating because the two of you look like the Grim Reapers in the background with the hats on, you know, and the dark clothing. And the guy is just kind of, and then the centerpiece, it looks like very hard to, it almost looks like a piece of ivory, or it almost looks like an animal that's got its rib cage exposed.
right in the center is
Yeah.
water bottles.
I mean, it's just fascinating. And
Yeah.
all these people going down to the front. I mean, you know, I'm going to hound you for an image of that because I have to draw something based on
I'll
that.
send you this. I'll send it to you.
Because it's wonderful, and everyone's looking at the camera, and you know,
Yeah.
of course you're looking cool as usual, but in context, it's a fascinating image.
Yes.
Because normally this image would not have existed. You know,
No. It was very surrealistic when we got up
I'm
there.
I'm sure you felt a bit strange about the whole experience. Yeah.
I will tell you, I would like to, the next time I go, I would like to spend the night up here at Serabit el Khadim. The ghosts of Serabit el Khadim would be very interesting.
Yes.
So, and again, it's not a big touristy site. It's kept up, and the Sheikh is the guardian of the place, but it's not a big touristy site. If we move on here to more pictures. Oh, this is just all of us. This is down on the ground that night.
Getting cold at that stage. Yeah.
It got a little cool at night. Here is, I mentioned this during the show. The first night John and I were there was a full moon. And this is a picture taken around midnight in the Sinai with Serabit away in the background. And you can see the stars. And I just set the camera up on the stone wall and did a handheld shot because I didn't have a tripod with me, just to show this is the light of the full moon at Serabit el Khadim. And that's where John and I were musing of, you could almost hear the people in their little encampments and so on. That was inside the Sheikh's tent. He said this tent, his great-grandmother made this tent. So the Sheikh. So it's quite an old tent. That's where we slept that night. And that's the next morning, trying to get coffee. There's no Starbucks anywhere to be found, but they made us fantastic coffee. Now this is the Sheikh's pickup
God
truck.
knows what you ate. But anyway,
yeah, it was good though. This is the Sheikh's pickup truck, and this is where he picked up John and I. We drove 30 miles maybe into the Sinai. This is where we first got our first fresh view of the Sinai desert after coming through the windy hills and stuff off of the Red Sea. So that's his little pickup truck he drove us around in. Oh, that's a police stop on the way there.
That's a police stop.
Yeah, believe it or not, that building is a police building.
I'm sorry, I can't really
They
see it
stopped
now.
us for-
It looks like full of goats or something.
It's full of goats and garbage.
And that's a woman, of course, dressed in
local
the
woman.
Yeah.
And this building, and they held us up for a good 2.5 hours, maybe.
Some kind of telegraph pole in the distance, yeah.
Yeah. And this was on the way. This was after we got across through the Suez Canal and came out in the Sinai. This is where we had to stop.
This is like, you're not in Kansas anymore. This is really, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The stele. This is the stele up on top that the first time I was there, Mustafa Rezik, he was the inspector general of this site in the SINAI for the Ministry of Antiquities, and we were all camped out inside the big old Bedouin tent. They had a fire going inside the tent, and we were talking. He says, "So what do you want to see up there? Here's how we'll get up there." And he says, he leans into me and he says, "Scotty," he says, "I have something very amazing to show you at the top of the mountain." And because my theory, of course, was that Hatshepsut was the queen pharaoh at the time of Senenmut, who she elevated to power, who I believe was Moses. So he shows me this stele top. It's broken off, and it's just laying in the dirt. He had turned it up, and it's really hard to make out some of the characters on this.
Absolutely, it's not.
Way over on the right side.
Were you saying that this was turned over and he
Yes, and
put it up for
there's
the
one
photograph?
character you almost cannot see on the far left. There's 4 characters here.
Yeah, I see them. Yeah.
On the far right, this is Hatshepsut, the Pharaoh Queen. She's
and
holding the
you
Ankh.
can actually see the breasts.
Yes,
there on her.
she's holding the Ankh. Over here is the Ankh, the pyramid, tall, skinny pyramid-looking shape. This is the symbol for king in hieroglyph. And here is Osiris. Then next to Osiris is, I'm sorry, no, this is Hathor. Hathor is here. She's got the disc in the horns. But over here, which was a bit bashed out, you've got the figure of Tutmosis III facing Hathor. And in this imagery, you can see here, down here, there's this triangle shape of the king. There is, you can almost, in different light, you can see the shadow cast across it differently. Here is Hathor, or Hatshepsut's cartouche. There's a cartouche over here for Tutmosis III. He was, when Hatshepsut's husband, Tutmosis II, died very young, around 29 years old. She said that she was to be the next pharaoh. Her father wanted her to be the pharaoh. Tutmosis II, her brother, was also her husband. So she was the bloodline. Well, he had a son by a minor wife, a harem wife, Tutmosis III, who was about 4 or 5 years old at the death of his father. So she became co-regent with him for about 6 years, and then she completely took over as pharaoh, ruled for 21 more years, and she put him up as he was the general of all her armies. And there was total peace during the time, never an attempted overthrow or anything. When she died, he was about 30 years old, and he took over as pharaoh and reigned for almost 50 more years as pharaoh.
Yeah, if you just humor me for a moment, I think this is absolutely amazing. I'm amazed that you got to photograph this.
You know what is amazing about this stele is that there are very few depictions of Hatshepsut and Tutmosis III as co-regents. This shows them co-regents with the 2 gods between them.
Yes,
and this is up at the top of Serabit el Khadim.
Yeah, but of course it's all open to interpretation, because there is no evidence of any of this really. But what I see is a native group handing over a mantle. I see a man who is obviously a king, crowned, very, very austere looking, handing over a mantle to a woman who is handing something back to him. So it's almost like he's handing over the spear of destiny.
He is he's the god imbuing her with the power to become co-regent.
But she's also handing something to him.
I don't know what that is. I asked him at the time, and I'm not quite sure what that is.
It looks like she's handing him his heart back in a way, or some kind of strange. To my mind, she's definitely handing him something back. He's handing something to her, and she's handing something to him. That's what I can see.
Yes.
Yeah, but again, I'd need a much bigger resolution
I've got
photograph.
a film of this actually where I was describing this to somebody while we were there, where you
Yeah.
can see more of the detail.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, sorry, Scotty,
It
go
is.
on.
Oh, this is my stack of stones that I left on the backside of Serabit el Khadim on our way down,
It
and it's
reminds me
overlooking this big chasm
of the
here.
stones they used to leave in
It's
Antarctica.
me and Rainey, and I've got my twin daughters here, and there is Sam and Flynn, and maybe Rowan here. I don't know if Ellery was born yet. She wasn't born yet when I was there at this time. So, or she might have been. She was born later that year, I think. So, yeah, that's my stack of stones at the top. And this is a clearer shot of the temples. And here, back here, are the caves. And then, believe it or not, there's this long, and it hooks a bit at the end and curves out toward the path here. There's this 1,600 years of Pharaoh's chambers, all about the size of a small car garage. Each one of these chambers going all the way back to the caves. And then there's the enclosures and all of this. We found a little bit of turquoise just right off the path. My daughters reached over to this pile over here and said, look at this. Picked up a little tiny bit of turquoise in there. And this was our tables where they were. And this is the path that leads up there. And I think I've got one or two more here. Oh, this is the Wadi Tumalat again. And this was the way we took getting back down Serabit el Khadim.
Cool. Looks very precarious.
It's a little precarious. John is helping one of our women guests who wasn't too sure-footed. And the guy in the white shirt is... why is his name slipping? He was our guide that we picked up, Tayyab, El Tayyab. You see him every now and then on my Facebook and posting posts and things. And this was Little Mo. This was John's Man Friday. He always
carried, humor me.
Yeah,
that looks lethal. To be honest,
it is. It could be.
It looks like there's about maybe 3 or 4 feet of solid foothold, and then there's like a slide down the edge of that. Yeah, and then you're
right here. You can see right here where Mo is standing. We had come down here on rocks to this little cliff face.
Yeah.
And then you take a step down to where Chris Conway is standing here.
Yeah.
And it was down these steps. My daughters jumped down there. And the path would just continue on. And it wrapped all the way down. And we got all the way down into the wadi that's down here.
Am I right in saying it that person in the white in the middle, for example, fell off?
He did not fall.
Probably. But I'm saying if he did, it would, what, 200 meters or something
like
that?
I think you had a little bit of a fall right here, like a little slide down. But if you fell off the edge of these rocks right here, you would drop down at least a good 50 to 60 feet down to where this path was descending. And then, of course, you're about another 200 feet to get down here, meters maybe.
And no handholds, of course, no chain or no link or anything to hold
on. No, nothing there. The pathway is all on the other side of the mountain that we came up. And one of the Sheikh's grandsons, he was about 8 years old. I show you, new way down, follow me. And so we followed him, and this is where he led us. And he's like a little goat on the mountains, just hopping all around the rocks. Then he'd climb back up and say, are you still with me? And, making sure we're still following him. And we got all the way down to the bottom there. So, and then the Jeep picked us up. So it was pretty cool. But this is the terrain we were in. So there it is. There is Serabit el Khadim. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Do you know what I feel like, Scotty?
What do you feel like?
I feel like I've just spent having a great couple of days with you, going over some great photographs and some great memories. And I think it's always a pleasure to come on live with you because no matter, you always welcome me, no matter what I say. because I think you feel that my input is somehow relevant to the overall
It's very
conversation.
relevant.
Yes,
It is.
and it's not like I come on here and say, "Oh, I can't hit my wife. I'm going to kick my wife out tonight, and I'm going to, I hate everybody." And it's nothing like that. It's always relevant, and the fascinating thing about this show is that, I do happen to believe wholeheartedly that the passage of certain reliquaries and ancient and very powerful objects
Yes.
have followed a route which you have been a part of through certain passages over many centuries, and have ultimately ended up in different locations for different reasons.
Right.
And there's many great historians who have covered this. Peter Levenda would be one. A lot of stuff is the Yazidi of northern Iran. All of these people have their own kind of reliquaries of. But there's something about the Ark which is, I think, as far as I've been able to read, and as far as I've been able to follow geographically over the centuries, because it all kind of ties into it. It kind of went down and went up and went out.
Yeah.
So this is a very dangerous object, which I believe somewhere in the Vatican City, they're still kind of
And by the way,
combing over this object.
About this site of Jabel al Lawz, one of the other features they found that they thought that was very interesting, and of course it's 3,000 years later, but remember that God told them when they were building the ark to build it out of acacia wood and overlay it with gold. And what's right next to this mountain? There's a grove, an ancient grove of acacia trees is right there. So there's another thing. Is that coincidence? Is it, But there it is. It's right.
It's kind of Occam's razor. It's kind of like if you're going to build, if you want to show mankind, or if you want a representation of the power of the essence, it would make sense that it would be extremely powerful. And only made available to the very few, but because far away, but because it was made available to humans, they made a mess of it on many occasions, trying to move these reliquaries across the world.
I have this little thing. I bought this in Egypt, of course, and it's just a representation of a shrine, of a bark shrine, or the Ark of the Covenant. And you know what I keep in this? I've got some little bits and bobs and rocks and things from Egypt in here, just little pieces of quartz and things like that. But I've got 4 little jars like this, and this is sand from the tomb of Senenmut, of this guy. And so I've got a few of those left in here. We had given some away at one point, but so that's what I keep in my little fake Ark of the Covenant.
I'm very impressed. But I mean, if you've spoken to me before, Scotty, as you have, I'm not a big fan of the Egyptian lore.
Yeah,
I don't think it's the be in and all. People go like, "Oh my God," the Egyptians.
Sure.
I just think it was a pathway onto something else. I really think anybody who I'm sorry to say this now because I'm going to annoy a lot of your listeners, but anybody who says the Egyptian lore is kind of like the ultimate in enlightenment, is very, very misguided. I think they were. I think they were just a means to an end. I think they were just.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fascinated by the culture, but I'm kind of bored with it too. Because Egypt.
There's a lot of things that people hail back to the Egyptian culture on. I just saw Ruben Fasshorse just popped in. How you doing, brother?
Hey,
Misu?
man. Will you listen to the show? Can't hear.
I'm so annoyed by Dave Potter.
Uh-oh. He's not here tonight.
Yeah.
So.
Ruben, did you catch the show?
Did you catch the show tonight?
I did catch some of that.
Good.
I'm just so annoyed by that. You're not in Egyptian lore, and
we were talking about
that's
Mount
what annoyed
Sinai.
you. Okay.
Yeah. So, didn't know if you caught any of that. Caught us right near the end here, though. So, it's good to see you.
Dave, it's always a pleasure.
Oh, this is Niall. You're seeing the beard and you're thinking Dave. Dave's not with us tonight.
No.
Oh wait, there he is. He's in the chat room. My mistake.
I hope I haven't pissed off too many people tonight. Probably with the Egypt stuff I did, but anyway.
I don't think so. I appreciate your outlook.
Well, all you white guys look alike to me. So
how are the white guys? What?
Look alike. Yeah.
Oh yeah. They all look the same to me. He says. Yeah, you Chinese people all look the same to us too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right, Ruben. Good to see you, brother. You have a good night. We're gonna get out of here pretty quick. So.
Okay.
Good to see you. Love you, Misu. I'll talk to you soon.
Very alarming. Very alarming.
And we're gonna get it. This is interesting stuff. This is the kind of stuff I like sitting around and smoking and drinking and talking about these things.
Well, I'm glad, Scotty, because I thought I was boring the ass off.
I'm so glad you came in tonight and talked about this. We could do some more of this. I got a lot more stuff like this we can talk about.
Yeah, but the only thing I'll let you go now because obviously.
Yeah, I'm gonna get out of here. So
the Scotty and Niall fan club are not present.
That's all right.
But I will say that there's a huge area of this that needs to be explored when it comes to Europe.
Yes,
and because I think that's where it ultimately personifies itself when it comes to the ancient cultures, and not because I'm a European and I'm European and you guys haven't a clue. Nothing like that. It's just the natural geographical turn of where these. And Egypt is up for debate. It's always. I've never been that fascinated by the Giza complex or the Sphinx or anything like that. I think it's perfectly reasonable that an alien intelligence would have come down and says, "Hey, we're going to just build a condo for you here and a couple of things and blah blah blah." Then we're gone again. So I've never held it in such high esteem. And also, I don't appreciate the kind of nastiness that comes out of Egypt about the complex. Its current purveyors and all this kind of stuff. But then again, in Europe, we have the same problem with the Vatican and various other, and France and various other areas of incredible, and South America and all these other areas that it's kind of like taken over by bureaucracy. But I certainly don't think that the being and end all is actually with the Egyptians, because time wise, these guys were around for a while. But before them there was somebody else, and I guarantee it wasn't human. And all you have to do just look at the geological kind of aspects of the land that's around the Giza complex.
And Joe Sapien asks, would the Ark of the Covenant have Egyptian-style angel statues rather than Western style?
No, very Western.
I don't. Yeah, I would think for a people that lived in Egypt and were wholly Egyptianized for a few hundred years, they may have adapted the style. unless God said, no, they must be little round fat cherubs.
No,
So
and in fact, the reason I say that, Scotty, just to one more second, is that on the journey down from Saudi through Egypt down into Ethiopia before he got to the Red Sea and back up again, and all of these temples, there was a few of them. They all had winged angelic fingers
yep.
on each corner of
Think
the,
of like the
temple.
Assyrian winged lions and things like that.
Yeah,
too.
it was nothing Egyptian. There was nothing kind of one-dimensional about this. This is like, these are like chariots of the gods. They were carrying us forward. So I firmly believe that, and I've seen photographs, and they're there, and they were formed on this journey, of this device, which I still call the device because it's highly radioactive.
Yes.
But it's in Western, very Western in appearance, I would say, is the answer to that question.
I would love to know, and I don't want to open up another branch of the conversation. I'd love to know what makes it radioactive, what has that charge. I always thought, as I mentioned earlier, I thought it was the power of God that gave it that. And when God left the ark, it wasn't there anymore. It was just a box.
I think it's this ties into many rabbit holes, but I think it's technology that we were meant to use in terms of spiritual growth, but only when we were ready. And I think that I think it was put in the hands of certain people who God, in his infinite wisdom, presumed would carry out the task. And the task was it's probably the answer to everything. It's probably, but given the nature of our biological structure on Earth, I think it was too powerful. It is too powerful for us to even incorporate into our own existence.
You might be spot on with that.
I think it needs to be contained. But see, I think that God made a mistake, because I always thought that God was kind of a cool dude. He made a few mistakes. He didn't really count on the church getting involved, or the third party, Maybe he just assumed that all of these primitive beings would just like take his thing and put it somewhere and keep it safe, No, it didn't really work out that way.
That's
even with
interesting.
and even with the sacrifice of his son, his son, this mystic who he, claimed that his son, and all of these. So God is kind of a trickster figure as well. So yeah,
yes.
I mean, I have to say, I've read 25 books on this. I mean, how much more do I have to read?
Yeah.
The greatest minds on earth have followed this, passage of all these reliquaries down throughout the century, trying to find a home, trying to find, and it all goes back to the same place. Right now, it's Vatican City. Vatican City. If you've ever studied Vatican City, it is not just a city. It's completely entombed. It's almost like its own little fallout shelter, It's like dome shaped under the ground. It's as high underneath as it is above. Above you have all the touristy stuff, except you can't get in,
right.
But down below is where all they put the really serious shit, So
I would love to have. I'd love to have a week to wander through the Vatican hidden chambers.
It's fascinating, So anyway,
we'll talk about that sometime. Now we got to.
I'll let you go, right? Enough.
All right,
for tonight.
Niall. You have a good night, brother. Thanks for joining me here.
No
I appreciate
problem.
it.
Thank you.
See you later. All right, folks. That's it for tonight. And Amanda, yeah, you're right. Don't think about it too much. You'll blow your own mind. And I remember writing some of the stuff I've written in my books, sitting in my chair, leaning back, twirling in a circle, looking at the ceiling, going, what the hell is this really all about? I'm blowing my own mind. So, yeah, that happens. So, everybody, thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate your time. Thanks for sticking around for the Captain's Cabin. This our after show, and we'll see you tomorrow night. So live long and prosper.